We discussed with the Security Council the alarming issue of systematic use of sexual violence in the conflicts in Syria. Sexual violence against women, against men, against boys and girls. It's widespread. We do not have access in most of the opposition areas. We also discuss the information we have in the case of where most of the people who have been displaced actually indicated that they were displaced because they had the indication that sexual violence was going to be committed against them. So it triggers the huge displacement of people. We discussed the effects of sexual violence on the victims and the lack of services in the border countries, in the neighboring countries within Syria. And of course, the issue that came up is the possibility of me visiting Syria, and we informed them that we're already in negotiation with the government of Syria to be able to visit to identify some of this issue. But of course, the biggest problem we have, the challenge, is the specific numbers, and what we know is the scale, the number of people, and the way, manner and character in which sexual violence is being committed in Syria. Yes.
How about this? My question is about the refugees in Jordan, in Turkey, in Lebanon, because there were so many reported stories talking about buying girls under the age of 14 by Gulf rich people. Also, I want you to elaborate a little bit about the flow of the migration from Syria. Are the Gulf states receiving any refugees from Syria?
Well, first, with the issue of refugee, my colleague will deal with the refugee. I do agree with you that some of the new developments we saw, the nexus between sexual violence and trafficking of women, we still have to do a lot of study in it, but definitely from the report we're having, there seems to be some amount of connection. The issue of course, forced marriage, in neighboring countries in which, and because the families are almost at the brink of destitution, they're actually giving out their daughters to be married by people from neighboring countries. We did discuss that, but these are issues which we need to study more. We've received them from reports, but we have to be able to do more investigation. And this is the reason why we actually asked the council to be able to ensure more resources are there so that the Office of High Commission for Human Rights will be able to deploy more people and to give support to UNICEF, UNHCR, and UNFP to be able to provide more services in neighboring countries within Syria in the border towns.
How about the refugees?
Would you please tell us that you specified that you don't have any kind of access to the opposition areas? Do you mean that you have access to where the government controlled areas, and whether you talked inside the council, I heard, about systematic sexual violence. Would you please elaborate on that?
We work through a network of the UN action against sexual violence. So we have colleagues, we get reports from NGOs and from the Commission. And if these people don't have access, it means that we can't access the information. So we ourselves do not deploy people. We are not a field operation. We do not deploy. But to get a lot of the information from UN agencies, from NGOs, and from other colleagues. So because they don't have access, it means that we cannot get adequate information. So wherever their access is limited, that's where we can be able to get information. The next question.
You talked inside the council about the systematic sexual violence, especially in the detention places. Would you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, what is imagined is that sexual violence, especially against men and boys, we find out it's a way of soliciting information. When people are detained in detention, that they try to get information, to solicit information. So it's being used as a technique to be able to get information. That is what some of the victims and the survivors told us, and the report that is coming out.
Is it by the opposition or by the government?
It's on the government side. We cannot access the opposition side. It's by the government, yes.
In the case of the Human Rights Council, when they did their independent inquiry, they relied on information derived from witnesses who came from the opposition area and from the government area in diaspora. Why don't you apply the same technique? I mean, trying to get from the opposition side what's happening there, because there are so many reports.
We do get limited, but as long as you do not have access inside the area, nobody is visiting it, you have a problem. We do talk, most of the reports for the Commission of Inquiry is actually reports that is actually relating to refugees. And this is why we say it's widespread. It means that people coming from the opposition and from the government are actually giving almost the same report. So it's not one side that is doing, but you have fewer people from the opposition side, and there, because nobody can go into the opposition side, it becomes a problem.
Mrs. Bangura was speaking about the sexual violence. As far as I'm concerned, I don't find this term very accurate. I would say sexual crimes. It's not violence. And those who perpetrate these kind of crimes should be deferred before the justice, whoever they are. And this is why the Syrian government established an official national commission to investigate all kinds of crimes, including the sexual violence against women and children. But not only that, because you have seen with me many times on the first page of the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Times and the Turkish newspapers even, many photos showing kids enrolled by the armed groups in the battles. So we have other dimensions of the crisis that should be looked into with a due consideration.